At this point in the era of modern gaming, you can't move for game franchises so long running that their sequels have done away with numbers and instead have subtitles like Revelations or Infinite or, Lord help us, Origins. Amidst all the sequels and prequels and spin-offs in a long-lived franchise, however, you can't expect them all to be winners. And occasionally there is one stinker in the series that gets substantially less love than the rest, shunned by fans even as they fondly remember all the others. Well, it's time to dredge those unloved games out of the murk of obscurity and disappointment and give them another look. Beware of spoilers and hurt feelings if you're weirdly into any of these. Sorry.
The Devil May Cry series is famous for its action-packed, fast-paced gun and blade combat, which has spawned an entire subgenre of games, as well as build up a lot of calluses on its players' thumbs. Making hero Dante zoom around the screen fighting off angry hell beasts is devilishly challenging but ridiculously satisfying, and players were hoping for more of that wild gameplay when the second game came out. So imagine their horror when it was easy. Now, easy modes can be brilliant for making games more accessible to a wider audience, but Devil May Cry 2 was not easy because it was accessible, it was easy because it was incredibly broken. This could most clearly be seen in the enemy AI. Enemies would swing and miss, slowly meander around Dante rather than attack him, and would often get stuck on the scenery, and the bosses weren't any more thrilling. Devil May Cry is a good series, I swear. Ignore what you just saw. And the combat was just the start of it. The story was very odd, the puzzles were boring, and all of Dante's swagger had upped and left, leaving him super mopey and annoying.
Looks like it's your lucky day.
The reason why it was such a mess was, surprise surprise, down to a deeply troubled development, where after the success of the first game it was rushed through and, well, you got this. The director of the original game, Hideki Kamiya, did not work on it, and most of the development team were totally new to the series. Although fighting game veteran Hideaki Itsuno was brought on right at the end to try and salvage the title, and has since worked on subsequent games that players have loved, the original director of Devil May Cry 2 remains uncredited. And to be honest, going by the fan reaction, I get why.
You will die. That much is certain. Death will define your journey. It will follow you, always close at hand. Your only true companion.
I don't know if you've noticed this, but Dark Souls fans love Dark Souls. Like, a lot. Led by auteur Hidetaka Miyazaki, the developers at From Software created a brilliantly gloomy world full of quirky characters and hulking great horrors to smash with swords. Then there's Dark Souls 2, a game more divisive than a heavy attack from a two-handed Zweihander. Dark Souls 2 is not a bad game per se. There are some interesting quirks to its combats, and there's one boss that keeps attacking you in random places throughout the game, which is frankly hilarious. But Dark Souls fans have found reasons enough to love it the least of all the Souls games. One complaint is that too many of the bosses, and there are many bosses in this dauntingly huge game, are just people in armour, with insufficient fantastical monsters of the sort that are so abundant in Dark Souls 1. Another complaint is that although the world looks interesting, it feels far more linear, with less of the interconnectivity beloved in the previous game. And in addition to that, having been made by a different team and without Miyazaki at the helm, Dark Souls 2 doesn't quite achieve the same impeccable vibes as Dark Souls, or indeed as Dark Souls 3. Furthermore, critics believe Dark Souls 2 doesn't deliver its story as effectively as the first game did. Which is really something, considering the story in Dark Souls 1 is primarily delivered by one introductory cutscene, item descriptions, and incoherent rambling from NPCs.
What if I got them?
To be honest, I've beaten it, read every wiki page, and I still have almost no clue. It's brilliant.
Pokemon games haven't changed much since they first released in Japan in 1996. You, a small child, walk alone with your Pokemon, fighting and capturing as many animals as you can, also you can win fights against strangers you meet in the woods. Totally normal. But when it came to 2022's Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, developers Game Freak wanted to mix things up a bit. Sure, it still had turn-based battles, gyms, and cute as heck starter Pokemon, but there was a massive open world, all Pokemon and trainer battles in that open world were avoidable, and from the get-go, you had a legendary Pokemon that, sure, couldn't fight for you, but was a fairly decent mount who could get you around real fast. Wow, that's actually really useful! But sadly, for many Pokemon fans, there were some issues. Over 600 of them, to be precise. And by issues, I mean Pokemon not featured in the game. Similar to the previous Pokemon games, Sword and Shield, Scarlet and Violet did not have a full Pokédex, with Game Freak saying they did not have capacity to add all 1008 existing Pokemon to the game at launch. And to be honest, it was a sensible move, as it allowed them to make the new region of Paldea perfect and bring out a strong and polished game for the fans. No, wait, hang on. It was possibly the most broken Pokemon game ever released, so everyone got real mad. Yes, sadly, the 9th generation Pokemon game had more bugs than the Cortondo Gym, which is the bug gym in Paldea, in case any of you Pokemon fans understandably gave up on the game before you even reached it. The worst thing was the frame rate, which often chugged so badly it could be mistaken for Thomas the Tank Engine. It juddered to such an extent in cities and towns with NPCs walking around that it was best for your school-aged protagonist to be on their own in the wild, unless there was too much grass or a lot of Pokemon, or if it rained or anything else happened, in which case the frame rate could drop harder than a Pidgey hit by a thunderbolt. Oh, and your mount moved faster than the game could load in all the graphics, so you had to be real careful in case a Pokemon popped in with all the textures before you could avoid it. Despite several patches, the frame rate still sucks. Still, with all the DLC, at least there's only 471 missing Pokemon now.
When The Legend of Zelda was first released, players couldn't get enough of this exciting new top-down adventure. Folks loved playing as little Link running around an open world with such a unique perspective, so when its sequel, The Adventure of Link, appeared and was something almost entirely different, fans were somewhat miffed. Sure, there was a Link, and a Zelda, and a sword, and a shield, but everything else was just off. About 90 degrees off, actually. In Zelda 2, the top-down view was merely for the overworld, and as soon as Link got into a dungeon or the like, the game suddenly swapped to being a 2D side-scroller, more akin to other games at the time like Mario or Castlevania. But not as fun as either of those. Zelda 2 did earn some favourable reviews at the time, but it was evident that folks preferred the pure sense of adventure conjured by the first game. And certainly today, with almost 40 years of excellent Zelda games to look back on, Zelda 2 is probably the one you're least likely to want to replay now. Not counting, of course, the Philips CDI spin-off games, because you can't replay them. Not unless you steal the Demon Amulet from around Shigeru Miyamoto's neck and reverse the hex Nintendo placed on those games in 1995.
Years after our great nation began, we gathered together to honor the completion of Vault 76.
We all know the best things about Fallout games are meeting weird NPCs surviving in the wasteland, exploring the world on your own or with one of those weird NPCs, and taking your time as you decide which part of your enemies to shoot off with slow-motion VATS. So, So when Bethesda revealed Fallout 76, an online multiplayer Fallout game with hardly any NPCs, a bunch of other players who might attack or worse emote at you, and a combat system with no slow-mo because they couldn't make that work in online multiplayer, we all thought, what the f*** are they doing? What Bethesda was doing was ignoring its strength as a developer of single-player games and instead following the trend of games as a service, aka perpetually playable online multiplayer titles that players pump lots of time and, more importantly, money into. Don't know if you've heard about this money stuff? Seems everyone's going wild for it. The idea was players would be role-playing the very first folk to poke their heads out of the bunkers in the post-nuclear wasteland. Sadly, as a result, the world of Fallout 76 just felt too empty, with players having to content themselves with audio diaries, robots, and rare interactions with other players on the huge maps, with some reviewers saying quests felt like they were chasing ghosts. That's not to say there was nothing fun in Fallout 76. There were a lot of interesting locations, and hey, how many games can claim to have a sweet Mothman statue? And talking of bugs, it was more full of bugs than, well, the Cortondo Gym, which is the bug gym in Paldea. Plenty has been patched and added to the game since, but it never picked up much momentum. But it did make some cash for Bethesda when it introduced the Fallout First membership, as hardcore fans got bonuses such as special cosmetics and in-game currency, all for the low price of £99.99 per year. You can just make it around 100, Bethesda. Show us that much respect.
What's this icky paint-like goop? It's moving!
Now, boys, don't touch that stuff.
My name is Luke Westaway. I enjoy Mario Sunshine. The following entry was written for me and does not bear my seal of approval, nor do I condone the sentiments therein. Who wouldn't want to play a game where Mario takes a holiday? From his job, from his responsibilities, from the trademark high-quality platforming with which he is usually associated? Sadly, that's the rep that has endured for Mario Sunshine, the 3D Mario game released on the GameCube that made a good first impression. Look, it's a veritable feast for the eyes, with Delfino Plaza's bright colour palette, fun water pump themed gameplay with our new friend Flood, and the introduction of the now iconic Bowser Jr. Aw, look at him.
Leave my mama alone, you bad man!
But scratch beneath the surface, and there's plenty that Mario enthusiasts don't like about this game in particular. There's the controls, which aren't always as precise as Mario fans have come to expect, especially the camera, which tends to have a mind of its own. There are certain levels folks hate to the point of being infamous within the fandom, and other levels that require a great many playthroughs and tedious treasure hunts in order to fully finish. A shame when the Mario games usually stay fun all the way to 100% completion. Add to that, the game was also pretty glitchy, which was not normally the case for the usually polished Mario series, and didn't make Mario look too great. All of which are fair criticisms, but as a Mario Sunshine enjoyer, I would just like to respond, I like how it's all sunny.
They've only left a single horse. We'll have to ride together. You take the reins, I'll navigate. Quickly, Connor, get on the horse!
The mighty church that is Assassin's Creed was built upon 3 foundation stones: assassinating, parkouring, and blending in with crowds by putting your hood up like you're some kind of Renaissance Jason Bourne. Assassin's Creed 1 was cool, but the 3 games that followed, featuring handsome stabbing enthusiast Ezio, really nailed the formula, sneaking up to your targets and clambering over the rooftops of old-timey Italy in a ridiculously fun gameplay loop, all wrapped up in an enjoyably bonkers plot.
This is why I've come so far. To find clarity. To find the wisdom left behind by the great Altair.
And then came Assassin's Creed 3, and it was fine. Unfortunately for a lot of Assassin's Creed fans, this new adventure in the new world didn't quite meet the mark of its predecessors. Why? Well, the scientists at Outside Xtra have narrowed it down to 3 reasons. Firstly, the world was too flat. Secondly, protagonist Connor wasn't allowed to have any fun and ended up being a little too stoic for many. And thirdly, much like Cinderella's stepsisters trying to get that glass slipper on, Assassin's Creed 3 shoehorned its protagonist so hard into the events of the American Revolution that it couldn't stand on its own 2 feet.
I'll be damned. You did it. That was quite a speech.
Lies, all of it, I'm afraid. Still, such words have carried us thus far.
The game was a veritable who's who of the birth of modern America, all telling poor Connor what to do next. Instead of being a person in the shadows shaping history via assassinations, Connor was the odd job man every historic figure used to get absolutely anything done. One particularly egregious example being giving Paul Revere a horse ride to Lexington, while Revere acts like a 17th century sat-nav.
Yes! This is it! This is the way!
And like many outside the US who only know the American Revolution through this game and the musical Hamilton, I'll have to assume that's how it actually went down.
Yes! This is it! This is the way! Yes! This is it! This is the way! Excellent! We are right on course!
So those are some of the unloved games in beloved series. Oh dear, the shame of it. It's terrible besmirchings of the records. I don't know, Ellen. I don't know.
Get me started on Fable 3.
Oh, don't get us started on Fable 3. Well, maybe what Ellen should do is put a comment underneath this video suggesting Fable 3 as another unloved game in a beloved series. And she's doing it now. And maybe we could make a commenter edition of this video. So yeah, pop your suggestions down below. And other business, once you've done that, why not check out some of these other videos? Subscribe if you like this, because we've made literally hundreds of lists like this. So like, you know, your great viewing adventure potentially starts here if this is the first one you're seeing. And if you want to go the optional extra mile, you can support us on Patreon as well by going to patreon.com/oxclub, or there's like a sort of square somewhere around me hovering that also does that. Bye!